workouts and meetings with Dwight Howard and Joakim Noah yesterday and have most spates at the team facility today. Both Howard and Noah left impressions that could be helpful to the team, league sources told Woj. Ramona, what's the latest that you're hearing from Lakers camp?
So Mo Spates was in today, and I think they were talking to him kind of as we speak. And the plan is for them to meet as a coaching staff and as a front office later this afternoon and decide what to do from here, whether they want to proceed with one of these three guys, whether they want to continue the process of having others in. But they've had a process to how they're going to replace Boogie Cousins, and they're getting to a place now where they're ready to make some decisions.
Of those names, Bobby, who do you think is the best fit?
Can I pick C?
Yeah.
Nobody. and I think, and nothing against Dwight Howard or Joakim Noah, but I would rather leave that roster spot open right now and wait for Andre Iguodala to hopefully get a buyout by the start of the regular season. And then I know Anthony Davis is reluctant. He's made it known. Rob Pelinka's made it known about playing center this year. But for me right now, I would take a pass on both players.
That's what I was going to say. D isn't the guy on the roster already, and that's Anthony Davis. But like you said, he's a little bit reticent to take that full-time step into playing full-time five. But of the guys that they have, it feels to me that Joakim Noah makes more sense of those three just because there's less distraction. He was reasonably productive in Memphis the last month and a half, 2 months of the season. And I think that there would be a lot less drama in the locker room probably from him in comparison to Dwight Howard.
Yeah, and then there's maybe it's this option D or E that we're on where you could just
we're going to get to M
talk
and
LeBron
N.
into playing some center and maybe still consider another wing there.
And option Q is really among those guys, whoever's healthy, because none of them have a good track record when it comes to health. All right, we're heading to break, and as we do, California, he's also entertained the idea of changing the name of the team, Ramona. How seriously are they considering a full rebrand?
So I think the stadium is Steve Ballmer's rebrand. Like this is, and this is what I think is like just this fascinating parallel between Donald Sterling and Jerry Buss, who the late owner of the Lakers, where when Jerry Buss bought the Lakers, he sold all of his real estate assets. And he became an owner where the Lakers were his primary source of income. He had to get really good at the business of basketball. That's what Steve Ballmer's trying to do with the Clippers now. Like he sees this stadium as the stadium to end all stadiums. It's like the greatest melding of technology and stadiums and arena experience that there ever could be, right? That's the kind of stuff Jerry Buss did. That's the kind of vision that Jerry Buss had when he first bought the Lakers. Like we look back on this now and stuff that we assume is just like standard course of business in the NBA. Naming rights, like the Great Western Forum, he made money on that. The Senate seats, like having the Forum Club, having the Laker girls, having an in-house band, even down to the lighting, ticket pricing where it costs more to sit in certain areas, and he kind of understood that. When you got celebrities to sit courtside, like it added a Hollywood element to your franchise that nobody else had. And like the Clippers played at the sports arena where nobody wanted to go to. They would literally advertise the opposing team coming to town to try to sell tickets. Thank God they had Ralph Lawler, to draw everybody into the broadcast. But you couldn't pick two more different owners, and yet they came from such similar backstories, right? Jerry Buss, they're both self-made men. Donald Sterling his father was a junk peddler in East LA and grew up poor, and he made himself into a real estate mogul. Jerry Buss grows up poor in Wyoming, puts himself through college and gets a doctorate in chemistry, then becomes a real estate mogul. Like they're the same guy, and yet they did everything so differently.
And I think when we're talking about the changing of the name, I think if you ask the people in Brooklyn, when we moved in 2012 from New Jersey to Brooklyn, we did everything but. We changed the colors, we changed the logo, but we still kept the Nets name. And I think if you ask the people who were behind the scenes, they would have a do-over as far as the name change there. And just kind of wipe the slate clean. And I know the banners from New Jersey are up in Barclays Center, but I just think it gives you a different identity. And if you're the Clippers, and if this new arena does come to play in Inglewood, I think that's something that you can seriously consider doing.
I feel like there's a real power in kind of reforming the name. And because it's amazing, Ramona, this is not that of a distant past that Donald Sterling owned the team. And now the Clippers are a franchise that are kind of seen as one of the model organizations in the NBA. And that took an ownership change and basically an overhaul of the entire team. But I think that there's something to be said for taking that Clippers brand. And while they have adjusted the logos to some degree, but taking that and saying, this is what it was and this is what it now is. And so I think, to me, I feel like there's a power in really redeeming.
I do too, actually. I go back and forth on it, but I can talk myself into both points of view. But like when you get back to this arena, and I know how important this is to the Clippers and to Steve Ballmer and his vision, you also have to understand the history of why they're at Staples Center in the first place, which we cover a bit in the podcast. But it's, the Staples Center was really the LA Kings idea first. And when the Kings wanted to develop it, they wanted an NBA team to partner with. The Lakers had a deal down in Inglewood at the Forum, and they were happy there. They didn't want to go. And so they approached Donald Sterling with the Clippers to be the co-tenant at Staples. But Donald, kind of didn't jump on board right away. He didn't see the vision in it. He was fine at the sports arena. And he was being courted by Anaheim at the Anaheim Pond, to the point where he even had a press conference scheduled because this was going to happen. This is how far down the road they had gone with this. In the meantime, the Staples Center builders, the Kings and everybody else involved in it, said, well, if the Clippers aren't going to do this, we'll go to the Lakers. So the Lakers then sell a little piece of their franchise to AEG as a part of this deal, and they moved to Staples Center. And it's going to be the Kings and the Lakers. And at the last minute, Donald Sterling decides, nope, I'm not going to go to Anaheim because it's just too far. I don't want to go to Anaheim. He's a real estate guy. Location matters. Okay, Anaheim's not Beverly Hills. It's not LA. And decides, I want to get on that Staples Center design anyway.
And then he falls into third place and takes another L, which really has defined all of Donald Sterling's era is the Clippers. I think the biggest rebranding the Clippers can do is move to winners and move to champions, like the Lakers are in that building. And we'll see what happens. Bobby, how long do you think the Clippers title window is?
Well, I think a minimum 2 years, right? I mean, that gets you to 2021 when I know Paul George and Kawhi Leonard have a player option in their contract there. And they're still they haven't even hit 30 yet, both players. And, certainly for this year and next year, they've got 10 players under contract. And Montrezl Harrell is the lone, free agent. So I think at a minimum 2 years, max 5 years. I mean, who knows? We saw with Golden State that it's never. We thought that was going to be open forever. So but I think at least 2 years here.
Title windows are fleeting. You saw it in Oklahoma City. You saw it here with the Heat. We felt like the big three Heat were going to last forever. Like Bobby said, the Warriors. These title windows that we see as these grand open things, they shut very quickly.
Right, especially when your roommate may be the biggest obstacle for you to get around in the Los Angeles Lakers, who are really still trying to round out their roster.
They, as far as the Clippers are concerned, you don't really want to ever bring up Donald Sterling's name. He might as well be Voldemort, right? It's just an era that they've moved on and from, that they don't need reminding of, even though me as the narrative writer, where but listen, this is your journey as a franchise, right? You see how bad it was to how good it was, and this is how they've changed. I don't know. Well, that's something that a writer and a narrative person can say, but when you've lived through that and you've been trying to dig yourself out of the shadow of that and rebrand yourself by doing things completely differently under Steve Ballmer and the new organization that he's built, it's just not a fun time to relive. And I think ultimately, they did make that decision to keep the name. They did make the decision to keep all of the same logos and the same uniforms and all that. And Steve actually did say that at his opening press conference, where he says, I think that this is part of our story. We want the story of the Clippers to be the franchise that comes back from that. So, let's see. He's finally put them in this position to do so.
Well, obviously, we heard in the podcast, talk to players like Ryan Hollins and Matt Barnes and Blake Griffin. But have you had any other players who listen to the podcast and tell you about their their feelings on reliving this situation?
Yeah, I mean, even during this, let's say there's a lot of people you talk to who tell you very juicy stories off the record that they don't necessarily want to tell.
Stories.
That they don't necessarily want told. With their name attached to it. And so that's why I always am very thankful to players like Blake and DeAndre and Darius Miles, Quentin Richardson, Olden Polynice, who has quite a story from the locker room. One of the ones that I didn't use in the podcast, but this kind of drew me into the story as I was just a young beat writer with the Clippers. I was I was at the LA Daily News. There was a lady from the LA Times. Her name was Lisa Dillman. We used to cover the team together, and that was the Baron Davis year, and the year they were so bad that they ended up with Blake Griffin, right? And one time Donald came into the locker room and he was really upset because he played Baron Davis a lot of money, and he thought that should, if he was going to spend money, they should win. Like he thought that's how that worked. Like I never spend money, so then when I do, it better work. And he was really angry at Baron, and you know, Mark Spears has written that story about how he used to heckle Baron, and Baron's talked about how disturbing that was for him. So he comes in the locker room one day and just is yelling and screaming at everyone in there, and specifically targeting Baron and saying how disappointing this was, except it wasn't Baron that he was yelling at. Oh. It was Al Thornton, who just happened to be standing in front of him, and Baron's locker was behind him, and like, you know, and the players were just like,
right.
What?
If nothing else,
perpetual cringe. That's all it was, just cringe after cringe.
Right, and you know, he had a disjointed view of reality. If you don't take anything else from this podcast, that's to say the least about Donald Sterling. And as you mentioned, a big part of moving on from the Sterling era was selling the team to Steve Ballmer, and